countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It is now time to ring in the new year, well, sorta, here at the last comic shop podcast.
Woohoo! It's about to be the new year, and we're talking about the new frontier. That is how we're going to bring everybody underneath this big comic book tent, is by talking about one of the greats.
There we go. And we are closing it out right this action-packed year. I neglected to mention last week, by the way, the last comic shop podcast, not a real shop. There's that place in Malaysia. But I do want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all those folks that have been dealing with retail this year and keeping their shops open late for all the holiday shopping and madness, and keeping folks like us able to get all the things that we need, because Christmas Eve was a show day. New Year's Eve is a show day. Everybody's getting ready to go party. But thanks for those folks keeping those shops open in the meantime.
Absolutely, Chad. I'm the host with the most, Danny Larson. I'm joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith, who are keeping our shop open on New Year's Eve this year. Metafictional shop, that is. But you're right, Chad. I mean, especially this week between Christmas and New Year's, right? Lots of people off of work, lots of people getting, gift cards and this and that. And what do they want to do? But keep on shopping, even right after.
This is America, baby. What happens?
So, again, kudos to everybody, especially those local comic book shops out there that have been keeping their doors open during the holiday season to make sure that we get all of our comic book goodies. And you're right, J.A., we've got a comic book goodie on this week's show that, again, has one of the absolute all-time greats when it comes to comic book artists, the legendary Darwyn Cooke. That's right. I think we've only done one other Darwyn Cooke book on this particular show. I think that was Parker the Martini edition.
I was going to say, if you like other cookbooks, you want to go elsewhere. This sounds fun.
That's right.
Yes.
I keep saying it sounds good.
Darwyn
Cookbook. Maybe he made a good souffle back in the day. I don't know. So the Darwyn Cooke book. Any case, J.A., who else worked on New Frontier with Darwyn Cooke? There wasn't a lot, because it was like he wrote it and drew it, but there was somebody else, I think.
So yeah, Darwyn Cooke did the heavy lifting with the writing and illustrations, with Dave Stewart providing colors, Jared Fletcher doing the letters, and then you had some guest artists who sort of dropped in, and I probably did some finishing and little bits here and there, backgrounds. Jay Bone, David Bullock, and Michael Cho. Yeah.
Jay Bone is a frequent collaborator with Darwyn Cooke back in the day. He did the Spirit series when they rebooted Will Eisner's Spirit. It's a really great series if you've never checked it out.
Yeah, a couple of killer issues of Spider-Man Tangled Web.
Oh, and the edition that we reviewed and read is the deluxe edition, because there are several different. There's an absolute edition. There's obviously the original issues. So the edition we have has the added pages, which has a bit more on the Suicide Squads. He actually wanted to give 38 more pages, and I think they just came back to like 13. He added 13 pages to the story.
Well, let's go ahead and get to the 10-cent synopsis from Chad Smith. So, Chad, what happens in New Frontier?
We learn that it's all connected. So DC back in the day was notorious for keeping their separate houses. So Superman rarely crossed over with Batman outside of the world's finest. What happened in Metropolis didn't affect what was going on in Gotham City, which didn't affect what was happening in Coast City, and so on and so forth. But with 2004's New Frontier, Darwyn Cooke decides, no, we're going to present this as though it is existing in one universe, almost Marvel style. And so it starts off with the losers and those characters from the war comics. The losers are going on a mission, and they get caught on Dinosaur Island. So they end up making the ultimate sacrifice so we can get that awesome panel of John Cloud diving into the dinosaur's mouth to take care of business. But thus begins the beginning of the age of the superheroes. And what Darwyn Cooke does is he takes everything. He takes the heroes of the time, whether it is Green Lantern. There's a lot of Green Lantern in here. There's Superman. There's Wonder Woman. He mixes the heroes. He mixes the politics. He mixes the zeitgeist. And what you get basically is all the right stuff. But instead of about being man's mission to the moon, it's all about the coming of the age of superheroes. And you see the Suicide Squads and their role. You see Carol Ferris and their job, and you get King Faraday, and all of these things intermingling as they all come together, and it culminates in the creation of the Justice League. But it's just this giant tapestry that goes back and forth for all the big players of the DC universe, of that transition from the Golden Age to the Silver Age.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Chad, that there's not really I don't want to say a main character in this. Everybody gets really kind of a pretty neat turn as these issues continue. Again, there are times in which Martian Manhunter is one of the main characters that you learn about. There's other times when it's Hal Jordan's journey to becoming the Green Lantern. There's some awesome Flash story going on in the background. There's even some really great Batman, Superman, and even Wonder Woman stuff. Lots of things to plumb. Even if you're a huge fan of Challengers of the Unknown, which I kind of sort of am, I won't lie. I kind of like the Challengers of the Unknown. They're kind of like the proto-Fantastic Four to me. It's oh, look at this group that wasn't the Fantastic Four, but they started ideas that they would eventually use. So it's always kind of neat, and they have those purple jumpsuits, which I think are, well, they're dumb, but I don't know, dumb in a good way.
There you go. It's kitschy. Dude, you're leaving out Wildcat, knocking out Cassius Clay.
That's true. That's true. And I will say this. This is J.A.'s pick for DC Ember on this week's show. I'm really actually glad that J.A. picked this book to kind of finish out DC Ember, because I think it really is a nice bookend to the story that we started with the first book we covered in DC Ember, right? JSA, the Golden Age. Kind of like the beginning of New Frontier, kind of talks about the Golden Age heroes being forced out of superheroics because of politics. And that's exactly what we covered in the Golden Age. That's everything we talked. And even the Golden Age book by James Robinson earlier, it finishes by saying hey, you're the next crop of superheroes. And so, man, I just think that that's awesome that we covered these two books as kind of the beginning and the end of our DC Ember this year. That's just my initial thought.
It's almost like we planned it. Maybe we're good at this stuff. No, can't be that. Can't be that. What I found really interesting about the book, my initial take, is how Darwyn Cooke was able to introduce these characters timeline-wise through the story, the way they were introduced originally in comics back in the 50s. I thought that was really interesting. But then, playing with them and weaving them together a bit more than obviously they had done when DC originally put them out. One other interesting thing, I read some back matter. One of the editors and some of the DC top brass had wanted him to change the story so that it fit that time, DC continuity. And he really was pushing back. He had a really good editor who said, no, that is going to destroy the story. Let him write what he originally proposed. He ended up doing that. And lo and behold, it won all the awards.
That's right. As the kids will say these days, let him cook. And no one cooks better than Darwyn. Taking all these things and finding a way to weave them all together. From Lois Lane serving behind the troops, and they're giving her, all of their fresh fruit and oranges because, they get a couple of minutes to talk to a nice-looking dame. He introduces the Green Lantern in the timeline where Green Lantern comics were first published. And Flash is right around when the Flash is published. And I've read this before, but reading it again with a little bit more background and being able to recognize who the Challengers of the Unknown were, not a big fan, not even a fan. But at least this time around, I knew, oh, wait, that's who that is. I have even more of an appreciation reading through this now with that little bit more background.
Well, yeah, no. Plus, unlike JSA: The Golden Age that we read earlier this month, I think this particular book, addresses a kind of a criticism that JA had with JSA: Golden Age, which was like, where's Superman? Where's Batman? Where's Wonder Woman? Like, they existed during these periods. They're Golden Age characters, and in this particular book, like they come out front and center and address, hey, Superman does what Superman would have done. He becomes like, quote unquote, a government agent. He becomes like a asset of basically the industrial military complex. Like, again, Dr. Manhattan or whatever, because that's what you would do with Superman. Wonder Woman, the same thing, although Wonder Woman has an awesome turn, and she's even taller than Superman. That's awesome. And then Batman's like, no, screw that. I'm not going to become a government stooge, and I'm going to become like the outlaw, kind of like Rorschach, and go into the shadows and keep on doing my thing.
One of his best lines is when he goes and confronts the Martian Manhunter. He said, it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a sliver of a meteor to defeat Superman. I can buy some matches for 5 cents to defeat you.
Man. And did you guys, I know we're reading this on a shorter timeline. Did you have a chance to read the bonus stories in the back with the first meetings of Batman and Superman where they have their fight? It was released around 2008 when the DC animated universe put out their New Frontier cartoon. But they tell the story of Batman and Superman's first fight where the government sends Superman to corral Batman. And Batman is just an absolute nut job in the way he handles the fight. Like, he has this experimental rocket tied into the Batmobile, and he's like, all right, I've got to turn it while accelerating. But while he does that, Superman slams into the side of a mountain face first, and he has the kryptonite in his bag, and he's playing all these wild tricks, and eventually Wonder Woman stands between them and is like, look at you two. And she talks Superman down from his position as the goody-goody and doing what the government is telling him to do. And she talks to Bruce and, eventually gets him to unmask as a sign of faith that they're going to work together to do the right thing. But as wonderful as the New Frontier proper is, it's definitely worth it, kids, to track down that extra issue, that New Frontier special that came out afterwards, because it has that story in it. It's just, you see Batman at his craziest. You see Wonder Woman, who's going to lead through power and love. And you see Superman, who knows what the right thing is and always striving to do the right thing. It's just all these character notes in here. He just knows how to play all the right notes. And it's so fun. And his style is so cool. And I can't gush enough about this.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And then to later on find out that Batman and Superman made a deal so that Superman could try to change the organization from within. And there's even that great scene where, Batman's got Robin and he's like, oh, you don't look as scary now, Bruce. He's like, I was here to scare criminals, not kids. Like, I want to be somebody that kids will feel okay with if I rescue them. And I'm like, good call, Batman. Good call.
Yeah. And he's got the Dick Sprang style mask for that one. He's the kinder, friendlier 50s Batman.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything works. J.A., what did you think of the main bad guy in this, right? Like, it's basically an island of dinosaurs. I was curious because it's not really central to the whole plot. But
no, and I had never heard of it.
Let me hit the timeout. Andy just said it's not central. Dude, it's called The Center. It couldn't be more central.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I had to look up that it was not something that had existed because, I'll readily admit I don't read a lot of DC. So it's new to this storyline. It was interesting. What I liked about it is it had this sense of sort of growing, impending doom that eventually brought everybody together. And the way he had told all this, it's a long buildup. There's a long buildup where you're introducing all these characters and all these superheroes and you're getting to know them. And there's not a lot of action for, I guess, a good 2/3 of the book. And then suddenly it's all action with this fight against this giant amorphous dinosaur spitting island thing. it's like, nature's chaos, Earth's virus or something that they're fighting, something that was created on Earth, and they're having to battle against it.
Right.
Sort of a Godzilla effect.
Right.
Maybe.
And it's always curious how, like, sometimes when you have really great villains in books like this, it's usually like us as, mankind standing up against some sort of like dinosaur or dragon. And I started thinking about that from a metaphorical perspective. And I said to myself, you know what? You know what the center represents? You know what all the dinosaurs represent? It represents primitive thinking. Right? You've always heard about like the reptile brain. Everybody has the reptile brain, which is all about survival and, base instincts and, kill or be killed and fight or flight and all that other stuff. Very primitive part of your brain. But then, mankind is supposed to have that other part of the brain where it's like it has reason, it has altruism, it has bringing up together of people to work for a common goal. And I really think that's what the superheroes represent. Like they represent, this is mankind's opportunity to stand against what could be just fear and primitive thinking and primitive instinct, and saying, no, we're better than that. Which I thought today in today's environment is even more important, right?
Heck yeah, and tie that back to the space race. The 1950s, this is the space race. That's what it is. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of someone else getting there. It's fear, of these alien constructs. Although back then it was the commies and whatnot. We're coming together to deal with these aliens with aliens on our side. Two of our big guns are aliens. With Martian Manhunter and Superman, and they've come to our society, and yet you have those beautiful scenes of Martian Manhunter learning through TV what it's like to exist in our modern world. And he goes through and he takes the form of Groucho Marx and he takes the form of Bugs Bunny, and then he ends up on that corny detective, which that was one of my favorite parts of this book. Is him, like everybody around him, Slam Bradley and everybody else, like, oh, what a cornball. It's like, blazes, guys, I can't believe this is happening. You have that shift into that modern mindset. Like this it culminates in JFK's New Frontier speech. It's put together so well to reflect the moods of the time. Every time I go through this, I gain more and more appreciation. Although I was kind of freaked out that they make Dr. Seuss an alien construct, but it makes sense.
By the way, speaking of kind of cool little side scenes, what about the scene with all the magic users up on the moon? I don't know. For some bizarre reason, I love those, like Billy Batson's there eating like...
I've got a headache.
Ice cream.
Don't eat your ice cream so fast, Billy. Yes, Mrs. Hannah.
But the hilarious thing is he's talking like this grandiose language with like chocolate sauce all over his face. He's a kid, but he's also like an elder god of the universe. Like he's Shazam. Like he is the wizard Shazam incarnate. Like he is the Rock of Eternity. Like it was great because I love those characters. I won't lie. Some of my favorite characters at DC are also the magic ones, like the Phantom Stranger and Spectre and Dr. Fate and Captain Marvel. They're great characters. And the fact that they're not even on the board, like we're not even dealing with them. Again, to the point of like moving on beyond it. It's like, I think somebody says to Green Lantern, like, hey, what kind of magic is that? And he's like, it's not magic, it's science. It's science from beyond the stars. We're embracing technology, and that's what the 60s was about. We can do this. We don't have to rely on ideas of witchcraft. We can solve our own problems.
He took Superman off the board. So in the fight against the Center, Superman goes down early and doesn't come back. So all these other superheroes, with the exception of Martian Manhunter, but men of Earth have to come together and figure out how to beat this thing. I think that was an important point that he was trying to make. And so all the other ones have to come together, and you can't just have this, one superhero to fight all your battles for you.
Yes, the resiliency of man on display.
Question for Chad. What did you think of the Green Lantern story arc in this particular book, where he starts off as somebody that was suffering from PTSD, questions whether or not he has the courage. I mean, we read a Green Lantern book earlier in DC Ember with John Engel. We're coming in, we're not huge Hal Jordan fans, but what did you think of his story in this?
He's the heart of the all the right stuffness, where he starts off as that test pilot, and then they show his connection to Rick Flag, and then Flag is like, "This is why I scrubbed you, because of your dad, and I owed him this to keep you safe," and like he's the heart of the story here, where he's that human, but he has that boldness, he has that willpower, he has that determination, and that little bit of crazy that it's going to take to survive in these times. The New Frontier is a love story to Green Lantern and those Hal Jordan mythos, and like I said, putting him in those 1950s, like he's the guy, like the Chuck Yeager. He doesn't get the Green Lantern ring until what, like issue 3 or 4? Like,
yeah,
it's all Hal Jordan stuff and what makes Hal Jordan tick.
And a lot of this is apparently Darwyn Cooke's answer to what he thought was DC's mistake of the Emerald Twilight story arc from 1994, where he said it was just an out-of-place gimmick to boost sales and didn't really talk to who Hal Jordan really is and should be.
It's definitely a redemption for Hal Jordan in terms of like how he deals with the center at the end. He is kind of like the guy that puts the brakes on the whole process and says, "Yep, my willpower is going to overcome all of this." And not only that, but I'm the Green Lantern, intergalactic cop, and you want to see space?
Yeah,
here you go.
It kind of reminded me of that scene from the first Avengers Infinity War, where Scarlet Witch finally shows up on the battlefield and like decimate the army, and why was she in the back? Next time, let's lead with her. Like, why didn't Hal just show up, circle the thing, and chuck it into space to begin with?
Well, one thing we're not going to chuck into space is our ratings of Darwyn Cooke's New Frontier. I think this should be pretty simple, but we need to get it on the...
get it in the ledger. Recorded for posterity.
So that Chad has all of our ratings for later on in this week's show. So without further ado, 1 out of 4 scale from J.A. Scott. Last one of 2024. J.A., what are you hitting us with?
In respect to New Frontiers, 1 out of 4 profiles in courage.
We choose to go to the moon, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Ooh.
Oh.
There you go. JFK all the way. All right, we'll go ahead and start off with you, J.A. Again, this is the first time you've read it. Chad and I have read it before, but what did you think of DC New Frontier?
It was a 4 for me.
We choose to go to the moon.
Incredible. Story-wise, you're hooked from page 1. It's a comic book about superheroes that doesn't rely on action to tell a really compelling story. Very Marvel-esque, the way he weaved everything together. You don't get that as much with DC, at least not back in that day. And we didn't talk anything about the art. It's a very cartoony style. I would say the best describe it is it's like Batman the Animated Series, very similar. It fits for that sort of 1950s vibe that the story is telling. Every character seemed to get their beats, but as you said, it was really, if there were 2 main sort of pillars holding this whole thing up, it was Martian Manhunter and Hal Jordan. My question, does Martian Manhunter, is that a new thing, or did he always look like that, the way he drew him with the spiky, ridgy thing?
So the first time I saw the Martian Manhunter in that style was back in the old Justice League International, Justice League of America days. But I don't know if that dates back to the 50s. I know Martian Manhunter was, in the first appearance of the Justice League. So whether or not they showed his natural Martian form or not, I can't attest to that. Maybe if one of our humble listeners would like to let me know.
Oh, right. But I really like that. I like the way that basically his comic book form from the Silver Age was his response to wanting to look like a superhero, i.e. look like Superman.
Yeah. And I like King Faraday's response first, and he's like, well, you could put on some pants. And then he puts on that sweet suit, which again makes him look like Dr. Manhattan. It's a lot of stuff from Watchmen back to that point. But yeah, I'm going to go next, and I'm going to also give this a 4. I think I'm going to make this easy for Chad. 4 profiles in courage.
We choose to go to the moon.
Again, I think it was courageous for Darwyn Cooke to stand up to DC editors and say, no, man, I'm going to tell a story that fits what the DC Silver Age was all about, honestly. And again, to Jay's point, we didn't talk a lot about the art, but I think it's because the art speaks for itself. I don't know if you can have a better artist to draw that 50s style. Not the 50s style that you think of from 50s comic books. The 50s style that you think of when you think of things like Fallout. Any of the movies that are set in like the late 50s, early 60s, Mad Men. That advertising look at that time. Darwyn Cooke is channeling that. All of his designs are channeling that. The colors from Dave Stewart is channeling that. And as a result, it perfectly matches what's going on in this particular story. And initially, when I first read this, I also watched the movie, which you can get. It's an animated movie, the DC New Frontier. And originally I thought that the animated movie was a little bit better sometimes because it chopped and channeled and, made it a little bit more direct. But one thing I noticed, because I did watch the movie again, I'm actually a bigger fan now of the book because of one point, which is in the movie at the end when they're coming up with all these plans or whatever, Batman's there. Coming up with the idea for how to defeat the center. Like Batman's like, we should talk to Ray Palmer. Again, making Batman the master tactician. In the original book, Batman's not there. Batman's not even involved with that fight. Like he's still in Gotham City hanging out with Robin. Like he ain't there, which is great, to be blunt, because he's not a part of the original Justice League. He wasn't a part of the thing. Wonder Woman's there, but she was part of the Justice League originally. So that all makes sense to me. Maybe that's something that DC wanted Darwyn Cooke to put in, and he said, no way, I'm not putting Batman in that room. But I appreciate that, and that's why, really, this is a lovely book. Get it for anybody that loves DC or just loves comic books. Great, great story. Chad.
Yeah, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. This is a 4.
We choose to go to the moon.
So I really enjoyed reading it this time around. I think I've learned a little bit more in the interim about the 1950s, and so seeing some of those big events. I don't think we talked about John Henry and how like Darwyn Cooke basically knowing that steel was to come went back and retroactively planted John Henry, which I don't think that was a part of DC proper.
No, I don't think so either. If I was going to say he was a takeoff, again, it goes back to Watchmen. I think he was Hooded Justice. That's the only character I can think of that's even close to that particular character.
Yeah, he's a folk hero, right? An African American folk hero, and
him against the machines and the train tracks and building. That's a part of American folklore that's just interweaved into this story, and so like. Watching that stuff come into play, that was great. Watching Darwyn Cooke play around with the secret identities and like having that dinner, where you see Bruce Wayne is sitting next to Ollie Queen, and they're meeting up with Lois Lane and the challenges of the unknown at the big fight. Selena Kyle's there and Black Canary's there, and there's all this interplay. It's hard to impress like how cool that was, because back in the 50s and DC in real life, the editorial mandate was, well, no, it doesn't make sense for these books to cross over, because why wouldn't you just have Superman solve all of Batman's problems and so on and so forth? So everybody stayed in their own lanes. But here Darwyn's like, no, it's all connected, and he just plays so well with how that works. And Jay, you had mentioned Batman the Animated Series. The inner nerd in me is like, well, actually, Darwyn Cooke did work on Batman the Gotham Adventures and the Superman Adventures, which led into him designing the sequence for the opening sequence for Batman Beyond, and served as a big inspiration for that. But Darwyn Cooke's role in animation is as celebrated as his role in comic books. But
what got him into comics, right? He started out as a graphic artist because he couldn't make a living as a comic book artist, and so he did like 15 years working a horrible corporate job doing graphic animation, then ended up owning his own company, starting his own company, got into animation through that, and through that from animation into actual comics.
Yeah. And so the fact of the matter is he's a master storyteller no matter where he goes. And the fact that he's able to play all these notes and then tie it into Hal Jordan, and Andy's bringing in the fact that this was his correction for the parallax and all those things that happened to Hal Jordan that, as a fan, you're like, ooh, that's rough. But he's setting that right in this story. It's just so impressive. I'm more impressed every time I read this book. So definitely a 4. Also, definitely worth tracking down that back matter. I didn't even bring up the Teen Titans story with Robin and Wally West. Their first meet up, the Darwyn Cooke tells a story with, I want to say Jay Bone is doing the art on that one. There's so much about this to love. And so New Frontier, if you love DC Comics and you have not read this book, even if you have, it's worth going back and reading it again. It's wonderful.
All right. Well, one other thing that's wonderful is recommendations, and that's coming up right after this commercial break. So stay tuned to more Last Comic Shop for our year end. Yeah, it's a spectacular. Everything's spectacular on this show. Stay tuned.
Hey, it's Mikey Wood, frequent Last Comic Shop guest and collector. And as a collector, I'm always in need of boards, bags, long boxes, and more to house all those comics. That's why I use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off my orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get me a discount on BCW's already low prices, but I know using LCSPOD at checkout is another way I can show my support to the Last Comic Shop podcast and their continuing mission to bring fans together under that big comic book tent. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's LCSPOD.
Do you long to see an exiled Greek god summon an army of heroes to wage war against his crazed mutant cyborg nemesis? Do you feel a deep yearning to witness the daily life of an evil, rebellious dominatrix in her natural habitat? Do you wish Saturday morning cartoons had more lizards with revolvers and wasps with shotguns? Well, you're in the right place, partner, because we've got all that and more. Lords of the Cosmos 5 is frothing at the mouth with testosterone-drenched battle cries, red-hot revenge plots, guns a-blazing mutant military ops, and some good old-fashioned unicorn torture. Now on Kickstarter.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. Yes, that time of every single show, which we give you other comic books that you can pick up at your local comic book shop, in addition to New Frontier, in any of the variety of different ways you can get it, whether it's that deluxe version, absolute version, whether it's the single issues. Believe it or not, I have found issues of New Frontier in the buck bin. I mean, I don't know why they're there, but if they're there and you see them, grab them, because that's a series that you should own in any way that you can get it. But we've got some other books to kind of close out the year. Get out to those local comic book shops. Make sure that you're supporting them even after the new year. Again, nothing changes as of January 1st. People still have shops. Go continue to be good consumers. J.A., what do you got for us?
Okay, well, going from the Silver Age back to the Hyborian Age, I am recommending Conan the Barbarian, bound in Blackstone. This is out of Titan Comics. Came out last year. This is the first trade, so issues 1 through 4. You can get it in trade. You can probably still get it in issue form because it's pretty new. If you get it in trade, the direct market variant has the beautiful Stanley Art Germ Lau cover. Basically, it's Conan fighting zombies, and there's dragons involved. There's this black tower that's evil, and it's converting dead men into zombies, and he's warned by this woman who's running away from her tribe that have all turned into zombies, and they end up fighting, and then they end up making love, and then they end up fighting some more. It's just great classic Conan. It really reminded me of Savage Sword. The art is incredible. So the story is by Jim Zub with incredible art, really sort of emulating John Buscema, by Roberto Della Torre, colors by Dean White and Jose Villarrubia, and lettering by Richard Starking. So if you really like sort of classic 70s Conan storytelling, this is up your alley. This Titan Comics, they own the rights to Conan right now, and they're really doing it well. They're not just putting out the omnibuses again.
Although they are doing that too.
You know, if you missed on the chance to get the omnibuses when Marvel had the rights, they're making them look almost exactly the same. Marvel, listen to this, so that when you put them on the shelf, they almost look the same. It's not different spines. Obviously, it doesn't say Marvel Omnibus, but it says like Titan Comics Omnibus or something. But everything else, the spine design is the same. Imagine that. But beyond just putting out old stuff, they're investing and they're putting out new storylines. So they've got a new Savage Sword coming out every month. They've got a new Conan the Barbarian coming out every month, and I'm loving it.
Awesome. Well, one thing that I was loving over the Christmas break is I got to tuck into, I think, a book that has some similar feel to it. It's a New Frontier, and that is on the Marvel side. It was called Avengers Inc., or Avengers Incorporated. It was done by Al Ewing with wonderful art by Leonard Kirk. The basic storyline is a bunch of D-list villains get shot and killed, quote unquote, in the raft. Janet Van Dyne is called to the scene to investigate because a lot of them ended up being like Wasp, Ant-Man kind of rogues. And so she's kind of half a suspect, half an investigator for the Avengers. But long story short, one of them comes back to life. It's Whirlwind, which is one of Janet's all-time biggest villains. But he doesn't call himself Whirlwind anymore. He calls himself Victor Shade, which is weird because that is the alter ego of the Vision, who still exists. So why is he calling himself Victor Shade? Why does he have the Vision powers? What the heck is going on? Janet Van Dyne decides to team up with this Victor Shade guy to not only figure out how all these supervillains got killed, it might lead back to her ex-husband, Hank Pym. But a very, very interesting way. So if you're a fan of the Avengers, if you're a fan of that like 1950s, 60s film noir vibe, Leonard Kirk is definitely channeling that throughout this entire series. Everything is a little bit more kind of detective work. They go to Valhalla because the executioner was killed and they got to investigate that. It's a crime noir story told with superheroes that really does meet with the Marvel continuity in the 616. So it's an interesting amalgamation of a lot of great things. So I can't recommend it enough. Avengers Incorporated or Avengers Inc. period. Chad.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to Darwyn Cooke. And let me just say, DC Comics, as much grief as we like to give DC Comics for some of their ideas that don't always work. I'm looking at all the varying crises after the first one. I'm looking at the New 52, which is an experiment gone awry. Since the 80s, DC Comics has been really good about handing the reins to artists and letting them make great comics. And Darwyn Cooke's New Frontier is no exception. And that leads me to my recommendation. This is something that originally came out starting in 2004, around the same time as New Frontier. But it is called Solo. It was a 12-issue series where for each issue, they would give an artist the reins to do whatever stories they wanted. And so listen to this lineup of artists that contributed. It goes Tim Sale, Richard Corbin, Paul Pope, Howard Chaykin, Darwyn Cooke, Jordi Benet, Mike Allred, Teddy Christensen, Scott Hampton, Damian Scott, Sergio Aragones, and Brennan McCarthy. And they give them each an issue to tell, little 8-pagers if they wanted, or, longer tales if they needed to. But they teamed up with a number of really great writers, people like Jeff Loeb, Brian Azzarello, Joe Kelly, Neil Gaiman, Lee Allred, Chuck Dixon. There are a ton of different writers. There are a ton of different great colorists, and they let these people cook, no pun intended. But I was able to find it in this very handsome collected edition from 2013, Solo, the deluxe edition. It has Batman by Mike Allred doing the Batusi on the cover. It is gorgeous, and it is just an experiment in letting creators create what they want to create and watching the awesomeness that happens therein. And so if that's your thing, you owe it to yourself to track this one down. It's still available on Amazon. You can get Kindle editions. It's also could possibly be out there at your local comic shops. But Solo, if you find these issues, pick them up. If you find this collection, pick them up. It's creators doing some of their best work just for the act of creating, and it's great.
Great recommendations, guys, to finish off 2024, but we got one more segment left in our final show of the 4th season, so stay tuned. Right after this commercial break, it is Chad's Data Analysis. All the data, all the ratings, all the grades. Whose company came out on top? Is it Marvel? Is it DC? We'll see. Stay tuned.
In a world where there's often 60 plus years of history to worry about, how can you quickly get into a new comic character or franchise? If you're like me, then you turn to video games. But how well does that work out? In some cases, pretty well. In others, it's a giant disaster. But how can you know which games will set you on the right path, and which games will just leave you more confused than you were before? Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So listen in and get the scoop on which games are worth your time over at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's starting with the woots. And now a speech.
I just want to say that friendship is about heart and brain. Who's with me?
Good thing is, he knows when he's buzzed.
And my brain is saying, when it's time to go home, somebody call me a ride.
Love that guy.
Me too.
Know your buzzed warning signs? Call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. I know everyone's already had their moments with their gifts wrapped with care, but now it's our time to give our present to you. That's right. It's what all the kids want. And we don't just do this because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Last Comic Shop Podcast 2024 Year-End Review Data Analysis, baby.
It's like his favorite time of the year. It really is. It's Chad's second Christmas. Chad, before you start, thank you so much for doing all the hard work. Like, seriously, you were the one that crunched all the numbers. You were the one that had to re-listen to all the shows. Not that that's a bad thing. You should listen to all of our shows in 2024. But Chad's been on them. So, like, thank you
once or twice
for pulling all this data together. That's awesome.
Okay, so we have crunched the numbers. We put out 53 shows this year. Because of the way that Tuesdays work. So let's get the party started with our overall rankings for the year. Now, because of crossovers and whatnot, we had 48 books that we ranked this year. And when it came down to our judges' grading of those books, the most generous grader of our primary three, John Andrew, with a 3.15 overall rating. And then I was second, usually the more generous of the graders. So notice I'm getting a little trickier this year, with a 3.14 rating. And then Andrew, often the most cantankerous of the bunch, pulls up the rear here with a 2.95, 2.96 rating.
Come on.
He's just a curmudgeon.
I listen to the shows. I edit them. You guys give way too many threes. Every time I turn around, you're like, this was good. You know what? Things are just average. Average isn't bad. That just means it was average. Come on, guys. Not everything is great.
Are you yelling at us for giving out threes when your average is basically a 3? We round
just a little higher.
Yeah, a little higher.
I'm not a curmudgeon. I'm just realistic.
There's a lot of people working real hard on these books. So I will say, the one interesting thing this year was this was the first year, whenever you consider all the work from all the different companies, that we all ended up with consensus for the first time ever, where Marvel books across our averages were the lowest ranked books in 2024.
Now, question: if you take Maximum Carnage out of the and recalibrate,
Girl, because that had a really bad rating too.
If you take Maximum Carnage and Squirrel Girl out of the mathematical formula, does Marvel go up?
I'm giving you a look. You don't take Squirrel Girl out of the picture, sir. Now, Maximum Carnage, we could strike. I'd be okay with that. We could strike the Krakoan era. We could strike that whole thing.
That probably drew it down as well. Yeah, we did read a lot of mid. Is that what the kids? We did read a lot of mid books this year from Marvel.
Did, but it resulted in Marvel being the lowest ranked book across the board for all of us, the lowest ranked books, followed by Independence were second place, which means DC Comics was our overall winner as far as our ratings go this year. First year we've ever had consensus across the board in that regard. Now, as far as movies go, we watched fewer movies this year. We only had 8 movies.
Thank you.
You had even watched less. You didn't go see Venom. You didn't go see
Joker. Yes. Yes.
The rest of us had to shovel down this horse shit.
Yes, and I listened to those episodes, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't watch that movie.
Thanks to our friends like Mikey and George and Ethan and Nicole that chimed in, John Engel with those movies. All those folks are helping us out this year. But yeah, when it comes to movies, I was the most generous grader with a 2.48 average. J.A. was second with a 2.38 average, although, like I said, he didn't do those last two. And Andy, our resident curmudgeon, 2.18 average for his movie rankings. Not the best year when it comes to movies, although that's a Spawn movie.
To defend Andy on this one, I reckon I would have been lower than him had I had to watch that Venom or Joker
what
movie.
What good movie did we watch this year? Crow, maybe. Batman 89, maybe. I mean,
Crow.
Those were pretty decent movies. Crow. You guys hated Golgo 13. We all hated Spawn.
No, I think we didn't hate Golgo 13. It was just weird. It was weirdly sexual.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable. I don't know if hate's the right word, but I did not like it. The movie selection this year was the pickings were slim. We had fewer interview episodes this year than we have in the past. This year was all about focusing on the books. And so a couple of books here that what I like to call where folks were out on an island. These are their island picks, where they are the only one to give these books a 4-point rating. And those include for J.A. Jay was the only one of us to give The Sandman, Preludes and Nocturnes a 4 rating. Although Mikey chimed in, he gave it a 4. If you recall, we did the first trade, and the first trade was still a little bumpy. I think
I gave that just based on that death issue.
There you go. There were some standouts, but it was not yet what it would become. And then, Jay, do you remember your other 4 where you're off on your own?
Oh, it had to have been Archer and Armstrong. It was pure nostalgia on my part, and loving, Barry Windsor Smith's writing and art from the early 90s. A year ago, I had a similar reaction when we read Harbinger from Valiant. It's just, some of those books from your youth when you go back.
Yeah, they put the gleam in your eye.
Yeah.
I get it.
A special place in your heart for those books because they were what drew you into comics initially. So that was my book.
And there you go. And that'll justify some of my island picks because I had Deadpool Batterblood by Rob Liefeld and Company. You guys know that puts the gleam in my eye and the beat in my heart, and I love me some Rob Liefeld stuff. And also, and this will come up again, Squirrel Girl, the unbeatable Squirrel Girl, which I love that book, and everyone else, especially our buddy George, did not love Squirrel Girl. But then my third island pick was 8 Billion Genies, which I thought was fun.
8 Billion Genies was okay. I don't think it was a 4 still. I'm still standing behind that. But in any case,
you thought it was a 3.5.
My 4s?
So you went with a couple that are tougher to argue. Peanuts, the complete Peanuts, you gave that a 4. You and Ethan both went 4s there.
Again, nostalgia and sort of that
and
special place in your heart.
Charles Schultz.
Just because I didn't watch a single Peanuts cartoon ever.
Now, Jay, we weren't far behind. We both gave that 3.75. So that's reasonable.
Okay, all right, that's reasonable.
There you go. The other 3, I don't know. Your mileage may vary. Andy obviously loves these. The one, Ultimate Invasion was his island pick that had the biggest gap behind it. So we did the Ultimate Invasion, Ultimate Universe by Jonathan Hickman, which I thought needed a little bit extra to care about, but I think Andy's just buying in. I don't know. What's the use?
No, I am. No,
are you still bought in now?
Oh, yeah. No.
Yeah.
If there's a series of books that you should be reading right now from Marvel, it's all the Ultimate books. I mean,
all of them
the Ultimate X-Men. I mean, it's
but that is very much its own little thing. I mean, it exists. It does. There's no crossover. Nobody from the other Ultimate universes come over.
They're just good ideas coming out of the house of ideas right now. So that should be like the line you should be paying attention to.
There you go. And then also in relation to something you brought up this week with our review of New Frontier, you went for on JSA The Golden Age.
Yeah, because I think it's super important. I really do think it's like a super important book. And boy, that back half is just tremendous. Manhunter, that's just awesome.
And the one that I felt might need more splaining was The Six Voyages of Lone Sloan.
Andrew, just admit that you were drinking absinthe. You were drinking absinthe that week. You were really getting into the French thing of it all, and you were.
The art is something else. Philip Drouin art. I can't say enough about it. You should check out the book for no other reason than the art. I'll defend it. It's fine. It's fine.
There you go. So those were our island picks. We're off on our own trying to defend these things. And so, all right, so we're going to go from planting flags to digging holes and let you guys know which books ended up joining our bottom-ranked books of all time.
How many in 2024 were added to this list?
Oh, buddy. We had 4 books join our bottom 10 of all time.
Obviously, Maximum Carnage, and I'm guessing Spawn, maybe?
There you go. Spawn just barely cracked the list. There's a chance Spawn gets out of here next year.
And I assume it's just cracking the list because there's that one really good issue with Angela.
Hey, whatever it was, Spawn Origins Collection Volume 1 ended up with a 1.94 rating, bringing us to our number 10 spot in our bottom 10 of all time. Now, if we go to the number 6 spot in our bottom 10, it's Blueberry Chihuahua Pearl.
Okay.
Which Jay was not on that one. That gets a 1.666666 average. And then taking the number 3 spot is X-Men Fall of the House of X and the Powers of 10.
They just did not stick the landing on that one. Did they not? Oh.
And I will say at this point I had excised the Krakoan era, but that also didn't rate that high. But then our number 2 lowest ranked book of all time, Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, with a 1.25 average. Do you remember the worst book of all time that we've done, though, just for funsies?
It's not the Star Wars, is it?
The Star Wars.
Nope, the Star Wars is number 4. We like the Star Wars better than Fall of the House of X and
Black Adam. We hated that book. Oh, my, Black Adam, The Dark Age, that was the worst.
Now, do you think it was... I feel that we rated that book so low because the movie was also so bad.
Well, that didn't help.
It was a lot of badness. That book
it did not help that week, but still, not a good effort by anybody.
It was rough. So we had some entries here. This is a rough year for us. We had 4 join that bottom 10 of all time. But we like to be positive here on the podcast. And so we also had 3 entries into a very prestigious club. It is our 4 out of 4 stars across the board. It's our Hall of Fame. It's our All-Stars. 17 members overall, but 3 new members made the list for our 4-star club this year. But let's do the rundown from the top so readers out there can go back and refresh all of the 7.
These are going to be in reading order, so the last 3 you mentioned will be the ones from this year, but
correct.
There's no first or last. They're all the same score. They're all 4.
They're all tied at awesome, right? The score is fun to fun to fun. But going back to February 2021, we had our first instance with Superman Smashes the Klan. Wonder Woman Dead Earth by Daniel Warren Johnson. Reckless by Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Then we had The Other History of the DC Universe. That was a great one. Persepolis. V for Vendetta. Our first Darwyn Cooke book, Parker the Martini edition, scored all 4s on July 26, 2022. Then we get to Mouse, Craven's Last Hunt, Mr. Miracle, which was the start of our 2023 season, Asterius Polyp, that Dave Mazzucchelli book. It's great. Day Tripper. Somehow we got all 4s on Day Tripper, gentlemen. I appreciate your good taste on that one. Darth Vader got all 4s. Mr. Miracle, The Silver Age. And now that brings it to this year's entries that got all 4s from the 3 of us. It was Silver Surfer Black by Donnie Cates and Trad Moore. It was Walt Simonson's Thor, Volume 1, got all fours. And then finally, New Frontier by Darwyn Cooke, the book we just read earlier this episode, rounded out the year with all fours, baby.
Wow. And that's saying something, because we also this year reviewed The Death of Gwen Stacy, which didn't get all fours, which I was pretty sad about as a Spider-Man fan, but hey, it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
That was dinged not only by J.A., but also Mr. Mikey Wood.
Yep.
It wasn't dinged that much. They're 3.75s. That's
absolutely. Well, as I said, those are the books, folks. If you want to get a definitive list over 4 seasons, those are the ones that we really feel that you should have either among your comic book library, or even if you want to go to your local library and check those books out, you should. Those are some of the best books that we've ever read on this show. So make sure that you're checking out that list.
So those are the books that we thought were the best, but what are the episodes that the audience thought were the best?
Right. Well, it's
they don't always match up.
Well, now it's time for... I know that my co-hosts love this absolute part of the show because Chad has nothing to do with these ratings. It's all me for this one. It is our top 10 downloaded episodes of the Last Comic Shop podcast for season 4. That's right. It's been a tremendous year. We appreciate everybody that listens to our show week in and week out, or even as they see books that they happen to like. Continue to listen to us in season 5. We're going to keep this train going as long as we can. But ultimately, these were the top 10 downloaded episodes by our fans. I do want to give a special honorable mention to number 11, which almost cracked into the top 10. And this one goes out to my cousin J.A. It was the Outback X-Men coming in at number 11, just shy of our number 10 pick, which was the Complete Peanuts, beating out X-Men. I mean, again, it's Charles Schultz. I mean, he's a legend in the comic book and cartooning industry. It's kind of hard to disagree with that. Number 9 was actually the first book of 2024. Gentlemen, do you know which book that was?
Ducks.
2 years in the oil sands.
How many books skew towards the first half of the year versus the last half of the year just because there's more time for download? Like, New Frontier obviously is going to rate a 0 since we're recording it right now.
It's true.
So this is not a scientific study of the most popular episodes. It's just the most episodes that had the longest breadth that we recorded during the year.
I get it.
Ducks was January 2nd, so all of these books thus far had some room to breathe.
Oh, absolutely.
And as of this time, we're working with the data we got.
An Obama pick. Obama picked this comic book. And I respect Obama, so you should check it out. Coming in at number 8 was Ultimate Invasion. George joined us for that show. It really resonated with a lot of our listeners, and that I think actually happened sometime in June.
Yeah. Now, are we getting a bump from George? Do we get a George bump whenever he comes on the show?
There's one fella, as we get to the top of the list, that does give a bump to our shows. And but number 7, the only book that was a movie-related book, that would be Spawn. People loved our Spawn episode. People loved us ripping the hell out of that.
Oh.
Sometimes people like that.
So it has nothing to do with the quality of the movie.
It does have to do with the quality of the show, though, because we were pretty damn funny. Coming in at number 6 is Sandman. Another one from our first month, but again, a very, very popular book. Lots of people know about Sandman, so that's not surprising. And now we're getting into our top 5, gentlemen. Number 5 is our 200th episode, Watchmen.
Wow.
That's right.
2-hour spectacular.
Exactly. Got a lot of downloads. To Ethan's point, when I told him that it was in the top 5, he did say, you did promote the hell out of that show. I said, true, but it's also a book a lot of people know. So if you're looking over our list, you're like, yeah, I know about Watchmen, so I'll listen to that.
And that gets Mikey bumps, Nicole bumps, George bumps, Ethan bumps.
Yeah. Coming in at number 4, our only interview show of this on the top 10. What do you think it was, gentlemen?
JM. Got to be JM.
Oh, yeah. J.M. DeMatteis. One of the dream interviews of my comic book career. Loved talking with J.M. DeMatteis. Hope he can come back to the show in future. But that comes in at number 4. And now it is time for our top 3 downloads. Number 3 is Avengers Twilight.
Oh,
that's
no.
right. Chad, it was a Chad pick, but Chad didn't have really a lot of good things to say about Chip Zdarsky in that one. I don't know if that had something to do with it, but I want to think it was just because it had the Avengers. Plus, it's a pretty good Avengers story if you don't read the Avengers normally. Like, it's a one and done. You can just
that's what I think. It's an Avengers story that if you watch the movies and you know the characters, you can read it and you don't have to feel like you have to have a ton of back matter and back lore and continuity dragging you down.
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
Number 2 was The Death of Gwen Stacy.
Wow.
Spider-Man, The Death of Gwen Stacy. That's a November episode, but that is how hard that episode hit. I will say this, gentlemen, it is on pace to break the number 1 downloaded episode of all time, which wasn't the number 1 downloaded episode of 2023 because it was released late. And that's One Piece. Like, One Piece is huge right now. It's our number 1 downloaded show. But Gwen's just, it's trucking. And that's because, again, a lot of people love Spider-Man, and it is one of the definitive Spider-Man stories. So, but the number 1 downloaded episode of 2024, maybe it's because it had a lot of leg room to breathe, to your point, gentlemen, but it was that cowboy himself, Lucky Luke.
What?
That's right. Lucky Luke.
I wasn't even on that episode.
No, you weren't.
Jeez, that makes me feel good.
It was a Mikey Wood, Ethan Larson joint.
Kick me when I'm down. The year hasn't gone bad enough for me.
That's all right. Hey, Lucky Luke. You know, I think we've talked about it on many, many occasions. It's one of the number 1 all-time read comic books in the entire world. It's up there with One Piece. It's up there in terms of its popularity over, gosh knows, that book has a lot of legs because it's been going on for 60-something, 60, 70 years. So, like, it's got a lot of fans. It's kind of like Peanuts in that regard. But, yeah, Lucky Luke, our number 1 downloaded show, joining the ranks of things like the 2023 overall downloaded pick at the time, which was Savage Sword of Conan, with Amazing Fantasy by Kari Andrews. Don't know how that, whatever. And our first season's number 1 downloaded episode, which was our very first episode, with The Vision by Tom King. So
I'm surprised that Birds of Prey didn't get higher on the list since Kelly Thompson called out Chad.
Well, I will say that Birds of Prey, if you're interested, was in the top 15, just not the top 10.
Another book that was fine. Man, O'Day, I got to be nicer to these people. Usually I'm the easy grader.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But you know what? There was one book that we weren't really an easy grader to.
Oh, you want to get into it? Let's get into it. I thought you were going to wrap the show. But now, we're getting into it for a segment, ladies and gentlemen, I like to call Hurt Feelings. So, you know, sometimes your friends have those things that they love, and you just got to smile and be like, all right, pal, it's all right. But no, not this bunch. Not this bunch. But I ran through, and in our bottom 10, each of us have some books that some other folks just so happen to give 4s to. So, I'm not immune to this. I've hurt some feelings myself, so I'll start with me. There was one book that garnered a 4 from another raider, but Ultimate Invasion. Andy gave Ultimate Invasion a 4. I gave it a 3. That's my mea culpa. I rated the book itself. So, sorry, Andy. Didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
My feelings are not hurt over a 3, sir.
Oh, good. All right. Well, let's get to J.A. then. Let's get to J.A., who also ranked Andy's Ultimate Invasion as one of his lower-rated books. He gave it a 2.5. Any thoughts, Jay?
It was just okay. It was just average storytelling. I didn't really get into it. That being said, I'm loving the Ultimate Universe now, so looking back, maybe I was a bit harsher than I should have been.
Gotta rank the book that's in front of you.
Yes, exactly. If it was Peach Momoko in front of me, then it would have been a 4.
Okay. Now, you did have one more, Mr. J, but we're going to come back to that one. Put a pin in that. And we're going to go to my man, Andy. Starting off with him giving a 2 to J.A.'s Archer and Armstrong.
Yeah, that's just
What's
wrong.
thinking, sir?
You know what?
It had nothing to do with the book and it had everything to do with Andrew's adolescence.
We'll get to that. Hopefully in season 5, when we cover the book we should have covered that week. It's okay. It's a 2. It's an okay book.
Wow. Still sticking by the 2? All right.
It's fine. It's fine.
Another book that he gave a 2.25 to one of my favorites, Rob Liefeld and Deadpool Battered Blood.
Well, come on.
Why you gotta do that, man?
Because there was like pages where it was like the toothpaste spread of just somebody doing a jump kick.
It was, and it was awesome.
You can't do that.
It was awesome.
You can't do that. No, Chad. You are blinded. Blinded by the light, which is your 13-year-old brain loving Rob Liefeld. The rest of us can see clearly now. The rain has gone, and
I apologize for nothing, sir. You are missing out.
Well, I'm hoping that we do cover the last of Rob Liefeld's work at Marvel in season 5, because I do want to see him drawing Crystar, because I have been excited about that.
And Deadpool team up, man, it's a banger. You should see the Hulk 2-page spread in issue 3. Oh my goodness, it's just Hulk's face. It's incredible. It is incredible. But let's get to the most egregious ranking in possibly the history of this podcast, nay, all podcast history, where a book well worthy of 4s across the board was dogged with scores of 2.25 from what Andrew Larson, a 2 from J.A. Scott. And George, I'm coming from you, George, for Short Box Summary, for giving this book a 1.5 rating. It is The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Volumes 1 and 2. I'm ready for your apologies, gentlemen.
You're going to be waiting until next year, buddy. This book is your kind of charm. It's your kind of love, and it just didn't hit for the rest of us. But that's okay. Not every single year of Chad pick has to knock it out of the park. You should see some of the text messages which Chad sends us sometimes. We're like, oh, we've seen your picks. They ain't so great.
Oh, man, oh, day. Now, let's go to say, across the board with all these picks, it's nice we have a variety of rankings and a variety of tastes. And we should appreciate that and celebrate that, even if sometimes some folks get it really, 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 really wrong.
Well, one thing we didn't get wrong this year, and I do want to point it out, was if you listen to my top 10 show download rankings, 6 out of the 10 featured what I often consider is our phantom 4th co-host, and that was Mr. Mikey Wood. So if you want to talk about a person that really does do so much for our show, he's not here, but I want to send out a special holiday congratulations to Mr. Mikey Wood. He made us that great banner that has got us so much praise. He's been on so many awesome episodes, and we hope that he will continue to show up in our 5th season here. So Mikey,
put together the Unity omnibus.
That's right. He's definitely our most valuable Mikey. That is for sure.
We cannot do the show without you, sir. So thank you for your service. And again, it points out that like all of his shows, there's only one episode in our top 10 downloads that only has the 3 of us. People love it when we bring guests on, whether it's Nicole, whether it's George, whether it's Ethan.
Or people just don't like us. They like the other people.
Regardless what it is, I think it's because we really do broaden our horizons when we bring other folks onto the show. We get books that we may not be picking, we may not think about, and it ends up resonating with a lot of different fan groups. I mean, Ethan picked the Peanuts. Ethan picked Lucky Luke. He picked Demon Slayer, which is another top downloaded show. I mean, it just happens. So you're going to see a lot more of that in season 5. We're going to have a lot more guest hosts. A lot of these folks are coming back for season 5, so don't forget to continue to listen.
You know what? Maybe we get Mikey in for Squirrel Girl Volumes 3 and 4. That'll give us the bump we need.
I was just going to say, it just proves that Ethan's got his finger on the pulse of Generation Z.
Gen Alpha. I thought we're past the
Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's got his finger on the pulse of the up and coming of the TikTok generation.
Oh,
well,
yeah,
whatever it happens to be, we hope that you keep your finger on the pulse of The Last Comic Shop by rate, reviewing, and subscribing over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We're not going anywhere, folks. We've got a whole season lined up for you. Season 5 coming up. Tons of more comic books, tons of more interviews, tons of more comic book related movies, all coming at you. I know this year with the movie slate that we've got from Marvel, I'm, for the first time, super excited. Not only the Captain America movie that comes out in February, but also then Thunderbolts, which has the Florence Pugh, which I know J.A. is salivating.
There's no point anything else. You just go for the Florence.
And then the Fantastic Four movie, which I've been like on the edge of my seat for years now. So like it's going to be a good movie season, believe it or not. So we hope that you stick around, watch us on either YouTube, download us on any of your podcasting platforms, but stick with us. We're hoping that it's even a better year for all of our listeners in 2025.
That's right. What a great year, guys. Thank you guys so much for doing this show. I am so happy and proud to be part of this. I have so much fun. So thank you to our wonderful hosts and co-hosts. Thank you to all our listeners that have downloaded, that have voted in polls, that have supported us. You folks are all wonderful. Thank you to those comic shops out there, which, by the way, the recommendations this week, don't sleep on New Frontier. Don't forget about Conan from Titan Books. Don't forget about Avengers, Inc. or Solo. All that and more waits for you at your local comic shops. And then we're going to keep on trucking and keep on doing this thing. So you could always head back to www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where you can find links to our socials, our blue skies, everything else. And what else, J.A.?
We always have a link to our merch store. You can always get T-shirts, tote bags, coffee mugs, hats. You can show off that you are, like us, very interested in reading and talking about comic books, because we don't want to be the last comic book shop. There is one in Malaysia. Sometimes we get people emailing us wondering why we're not open. We need to reach out and have a conversation with those guys sometime, some sort of collaboration.
It's been 4 years. It's time.
Yeah. They're probably angry because they're like, dude, you guys are stealing all our advertising, man.
Why do people keep asking us about Lucky Luke?
But check it out. It's we have fun recording the show. We hope you have fun listening to the show.
And make sure that if you got any of your comic books this holiday season, that you find great ways to protect them. And you can do that by going out to bcwsupplies.com using the promo code LCSPOD. Save yourself 10% on all those comic book related supplies, bags, boards, boxes, you name it. You want to protect it, you can get it at bcwsupplies.com. Plus trading card stuff, plus other collectible stuff. You got a football helmet for Christmas, got a basketball with some autograph. I don't know who's a popular basketball player. I watch college basketball, but they don't talk about
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
In case,
good, thank you.
Make sure that you're using that promo code LCSPOD and saving yourself 10%. And until next week, when we will be back with the first episode of Season 5, and it is a huge one. Everybody's coming back. Mikey, Nicole, Ethan, George. We're going to be doing our first ever fantasy team draft. That's right. Comic book characters mashed together. You don't want to miss it. Who's going to make the best team?
Next week. Nay, next year. Come back for the whole year.
That's right. I was the host with the most, and I was always joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. And we hope that you stay safe, stay wonderful in the upcoming year. And remember, ask not what your podcast can do for you. What can you do for this podcast?
Yes,
by ordering things from bcwsupplies.com. Promo code LCSPOD.
Just keep listening. We love you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
It's easy, but because it's hard.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.